there was a mathematician by the name of Peter Stoner who did the math on the odds of fulfilling 48 of the prophecies. And that's 1 in 10 to the 157th power. That's 48. And Jesus fulfilled 324.
The Bible has over 5,686 Greek manuscripts, which is significantly more documentation than like Plato or Aristotle. Aristotle only has 49, and Plato only has 7.
And you said 5,000?
Yeah, 5,000.
Bro.
Can't be created or destroyed, right?
Yeah. So how do we start then?
If it can't be
Something come
created,
from nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
If it can't be created and it can't be destroyed, how do we start from nothing and end up with an ever-expanding universe?
Hey guys, it's Dorm Room Disciples, a podcast from our Christian ministry, Aggies for Christ, here at New Mexico State University.
We are college students who love Jesus, and our goal is for you to as well.
Not only to love him, but to follow him and live out our lives based on his word.
Each episode, we're going to be talking about what it looks like to follow God in various stages of our lives and also while in college.
We hope you enjoy! Alright, welcome back guys. Tonight we're talking about apologetics.
Woo.
So, just to define this, apologetics is the intellectual defense of the truth of the Christian faith. Calvin's filling in for us. Kiki's a little sick right now, and Desiree too. Desiree, it's her first time on.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah? You want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, I'm Desiree. I am a freshman at NMSU and I'm studying business management and finance. And I'm happy to be here. I'm so excited, honestly.
We're happy you're here too. Thanks for making it. So just want to ask real quick, why is apologetics important? Why is it important to defend our faith? Anybody got anything?
Well, I feel like just a little preface. I love apologetics. I'm really excited about this podcast because I love apologetics. But I feel like apologetics, one, is important to know the stuff about our faith, because if you don't know about what you believe, you won't be able to spread what we believe. And we're called to in Matthew 28:11. Is that what it is? The Great Commission? Go and make disciples of all nations, right?
Sure.
We're meant to spread the gospel, and if we don't know what we believe, if we don't have solid foundation of what we believe, then it's a lot harder to, and not impossible. I've heard stories of people spreading the gospel right after hearing the basics of a gospel, but it is good to know this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's important because how can you truly say you believe something but not know how to defend your own beliefs?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you could, if I tell you I'm a Christian and you ask me why, and I have no why, it's kind of hard for me to say I believe that in that moment. So, brief disclaimer, this is a broad topic. We're not going to cover everything. People spend their entire lives studying this, so this is just a little snippet. But, yeah. So it's important to evangelize, and it's important to, defend your own beliefs, right? 1 Peter 3:14 through 16, it says, "But even if you suffer for doing what is right, God will reward you for it. So don't worry or be afraid of their threats. Instead, you must worship Christ as Lord of your life. And if someone asks you about your hope as a believer, always be ready to explain it. But do this in a gentle and respectful way. Keep your conscience clear. Then, if people speak against you, they will be ashamed when they see what a good life you live because you belong to Christ." So in, verse 15, that word explain, other translations have it in there as defend, and the Greek word in the original language is apologia, which is the root word for apologetics. So this is
this whole idea comes from, is those verses right there.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I think it's important to note though that like when it's saying defend, it's I don't see it as in like a fighting way.
right.
Like if Desiree and I are like fist fighting, that's not the same way of like having a spiritual conversation.
100%.
You know,
Right.
like it's defending by like building up, I guess like background for your faith and like evidence, not as in like I'm here to battle you.
Right.
You know, like it says like
Do it in a gentle and respectful way.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like and I found with evangelism, the first rule of evangelism is like ask. Be like, hey, is it cool if I have this kind of conversation with you? Can I talk about God? And if they say no, great. You know, thank you for giving me your time. I'll be on my way. That's number one. Because if we're not respectful, if we're not gentle, it's setting a standard of Christian that's not representing
It can
Jesus.
sound like a conversion almost.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
instead of like like apologetics is supposed to be a conversation,
Right.
and instead it will actually end up sounding like you're trying to convert them, and that's not at all what like you want to do. I think for this, apologetics is super important, and defending apologetics is super important because honestly, Lord is your father. So it's like defending a family member. That's like defending your person. That's like he's in your corner. It's like defending like a best friend even, where it's just like you don't want to offend the person that you're talking to, but at the same time like it's just like having them in your corner and just like this is the person who I believe in and this is why I believe this. So I'm going to stand on him and like
That's good. That's good. Another thing I wanted to bring up is like that conversation piece, right? It says if someone asks you about your hope, right? What does it say that? If someone asks you about your hope as a believer,
Always be ready. So it's not always coming at someone with a defense. It's more of if the question ever arises, like, why do you believe this? Then be ready to defend what you believe.
Right. I'm not going up to Emma, like, just randomly never meeting her before and be like, hey, do you want to know, like, would you like to hear about how, like, accurate the Bible is historically?
yeah, exactly.
You know, that's just doesn't make sense.
Well, it's kind of crazy because, like, sometimes I scroll on TikTok and I see, like, people come up and it's always, like, they've been praying for their friend to find faith, they've been praying for a loved one to find faith, and it's, like, whenever their friend calls them and is like, hey, like, I'm actually kind of ready for faith, and you're like, sick, this is what I have to tell you, these are things that you can get started, and it's, like, almost like a jump boost, but I think also it's definitely God's timing for whenever he's ready for you to be ready for faith as well.
Yeah.
for sure.
All right. So, how can we create an objective argument for Christianity? Where do we start?
That's a big question.
That is a good question. Where do you want to start? You want to start just with the Bible in general?
I say we start with the Bible, start with the Gospels.
Gospels,
you know?
okay.
Like, without the Gospels, the rest of the Bible, you know.
Yeah.
What's your
I like
favorite
it, man.
gospel?
Oh, that's a hard question. John. But
okay.
it's a hard question.
I like it. I got a lot on that. So,
Awesome.
first of all, the Gospels help answer a main question of if the Bible is internally consistent. And that's an important question because if the Bible isn't consistent internally, then how could it be true, right?
Mm-hmm.
For something to be true, it has to be internally consistent. For like a piece of work, whatever, documents, they need to be internally consistent. They can't contradict themselves. And so I think the Gospels are a really good picture of the internal consistency of the Bible. They were written, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. For those of you who don't know, those are the Gospels that we're talking about. Written by 4 different disciples of Christ. They're eyewitness accounts, right? But they're all written independently. So the 4 apostles, right? They didn't sit down together. They didn't write them together.
Mm-hmm.
They wrote them independently at separate times in separate places. And yet, they all include the same exact stories, right? Which I think is huge. Does anybody have anything else about that? If not, I have more.
About books in the Bible, or about just the Bible in general? 'Cause I have stuff about the Bible.
Let's start with the Gospels. Yeah, you got anything?
I think the Gospels, if you're wanting to get into reading the Bible but you have like no idea where to start, I think the Gospels is a really good place. But I think it's like there's 4 books to choose from. Like, where do I start? And John and Matthew are probably one of my favorites to start in. I definitely started in John whenever I was starting to read the Bible, but I quickly moved to Matthew, and you'll be able to like see how like their stories connect super easily as well, which is super cool.
Yeah.
Once you've read one gospel, you'll start like, and then you read the next. You're like, oh wait, I recognize this, and then the next, wait, I recognize this. But the biggest thing for me is like the fact that they are slightly different.
Yeah.
You know, like not different in the story, the fundamentals, but like the way it's told, the way it's perceived. You know, and that, like, okay, if Desiree and I are taking a test and I'm copying off, it's going to be pretty exact, right? Like the same, we're going to be writing the exact same thing word for word, but it just goes to show they're in different places. You know, there's a different like perception on this. They're written for different audiences as well.
Same writing assignment, different
Right.
areas.
Yeah. It makes it almost more truthful, because if you think about if the police were going to go and question all 4 of us, and we all said the same thing word for word, is that more believable, or is it more believable if we all said the same thing in different perspectives, from our own perspectives? The latter is going to be more believable, right? Because each of us are our own individuals. We all perceive things differently, so we're not going to say the exact same thing, even though we all witnessed the exact same things, right? So I think that's a big thing for how truthful the Gospels are, and the Bible as a whole.
And another like thing that I love about the Gospels is, okay, the resurrection, right? Well, first of all, Gospels are either true or untrue, right? Those are the only 2 options.
Right.
They're either a lie made up by the disciples, or they're God-breathed truth. And so if they were to make up a lie, a believable lie, they would not have the first like testimonies of seeing Jesus alive be women at the time. Because at the time, women were like viewed inaccurately and like just as
they were less than.
Right, exactly. But the first like 2 or 3 people who see Jesus are women, right? And I feel like Jesus had that on purpose, right?
100%.
Like to show like, hey, like this is truth, and we're not lying at all. We're not trying to convince you of anything, like, and I'm sure many people were like, no, that's stupid, that's ridiculous, but that's what happened, right? God used both men and women, like, throughout the whole Bible, and like the fact that they don't try to hide that for the sake of the world at the time, I think is huge.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I've heard the argument that there's very little archaeological evidence of Jesus' life. And I think that's a pretty silly argument, because in the past, in general, have we ever found archaeological evidence of peasants? Like, being honest. Jesus, in his time, he was not an elite, he was not a king, he was not anyone special. Obviously, we know now who he is, right? And he is, to us, very special, but to the world standards, he was nothing special. So if he's not a person of importance in that time, why would there be any archaeological evidence, right?
Right. Archaeological evidence is from like worldly waves, while he made spiritual waves.
100%. Another thing about Jesus, since we're just talking about the Gospels. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I thought you were going to move on to Jesus topic instead of the Bible.
Yeah.
Are you?
Do you want to talk about the Bible first?
I just have one thing to
Let's
say.
go to the Bible.
No,
it's good.
Guys, I did my research before this because I felt like I wasn't very knowledgeable on this topic. I don't know. But I found out that the Bible has over 5,686 Greek manuscripts, which is significantly more documentation than like Plato or Aristotle. Aristotle only has 49, and Plato only has 7.
And you said 5,000?
Yeah,
That's
5,686.
That's absurd.
Dude, and we study
Crazy.
Aristotle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Aristotle's like
History.
huge in science and
Yeah.
like the creation of science.
Yeah, people are like, Jesus, who's that guy?
Yeah.
What?
I have another thing about the Bible. So, just the composition of the Bible. It's 66 books, written by over 40 authors in 3 different languages: Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. And it was all written over a span of 1,500 years. And yet, the theme of every single book of the Bible consistently points towards Jesus. Now, how can that be if that's not the truth? Like, how are you gonna get 40 different people over a span of 1,500 years to talk about the same thing if it's not the truth?
Right.
Not only that, but how do they cross-reference? Like, how can you talk about one thing in the Bible to then talk about another thing in the Bible?
Yeah.
Like,
You
they
guys have seen that?
they talk
Yeah.
together.
Have
Like
you seen
rainbow
the
picture?
cross-reference tree? Like,
Yeah, it's insane.
It's-
I think
we'll
I
have to
have
put
it
it
in
Well,
my
in-
Bible.
Okay,
We'll
guys,
have to
I
put
have
a
the She
picture of
Reads
it.
Truth Bible, and it has literally a list of like cross-references before each day. And then I'm currently finishing up James right now. And it literally says in James, and this is just because it's a cross-reference and I think it's funny. It says in James, let me see, sorry, actually. So it also says, I'm in James 4, and it says, so whatever wants to be friends to the world become an enemy of God. And then it says, or do you think it's without reason that the scripture says the spirit he made to dwell in us envies intensely? So like it's even like even the scripture says, and that happens like a million times in the Bible, is even the scripture says.
Yeah, that's good. Another thing about the Bible, since we're on the topic, a big argument is that it's not historically accurate. But I found this article literally titled "How Accurate is the Bible?" And it's written by this guy. His name is Dr. Kenneth Boa, and he has his master's in theology and 2 PhDs. And one thing he says, I have like 3 different quotes from this article, but one of them says, out of the multitude of archaeological discoveries related to the Bible, consider a few examples to illustrate the remarkable external substantiation of biblical claims. Evacuations at Nuzi from 1925 to 1941, Mari discovered in 1933, and this one I might butcher it, but Alalak
Yeah, I think so.
from 1937 to 1939 and 1946 to 1949 provide helpful background information that fits well with the Genesis stories of the patriarchal period. So I looked up these 3 archaeological excavations that he talks about, and each of them, so the one at Nuzi was a bunch of tablets that were found that basically support the fact that Genesis and other books in the Old Testament are grounded in family, clan, and tribal records that are carefully passed down. So, like, it's physical records from these families, from the tribes of Israel and these families before the tribes, that were carefully passed down. And it's not like word of mouth. Like, it's meticulous records that they wrote. And back then, these were the only people that cared about family this much. And then for the Mari ones, there was this massive temple that was unearthed, and there were thousands of tablets again that provided information on the Amorites that was closely followed what the Bible says about the Amorites and other stories in the Bible. And the same thing found at Alalach. It also was a bunch of tablets that were found that confirmed several stories throughout the Old Testament. So
those are just 3 archaeological sites
Mm-hmm.
out of a lot that
Yeah.
prove the historical accuracy of the Bible.
Right.
So,
That's huge.
I just have to correct myself from earlier because I said there's only 5,686 for the Bible, but it's actually only for the New Testament. So there's more, yeah.
wow.
I was like thinking about that. I was like,
Pause.
And we thought it was a lot.
I didn't want to
That's
get
less
called
than
out in the
half.
video.
They're like, actually. I feel like there's gonna be so many of those people in the comments. Like,
I hope so.
This isn't biblically accurate.
So, the New Testament, right? That's what you said?
Yeah.
That's less than half of the
Yeah.
Bible.
yeah, like
That's crazy.
a quarter, maybe.
All right.
That's crazy.
Where do we want to go next? Do we
Dude.
want to go back to Jesus?
I say
kinda
let's
wanna
go back to Jesus.
I'd love to go back to Jesus.
So why do we believe Jesus is who he says he is? That's
Okay.
good, huh?
Okay. So, many reasons, right? One that I'd like to point out is the prophecies fulfilled, right?
Yes, sir.
So throughout the Old Testament, there's a lot of prophetic books. Like God used prophets to tell about Jesus, when he'd come, when he'd do, all that kind of stuff. And Jesus fulfilled those prophecies. I think upwards of 80 prophecies he fulfilled. And there's, I don't remember exactly like where it is from, but you can look it up. The like chances of him like fulfilling only 8 of those prophecies is the same chances of filling the entire state of Texas foot in silver dollars, marking one of them with a red marker, putting it in a random place. That one being the first one picking it up.
That's crazy.
That's the chances of someone fulfilling only 8 of those prophecies, and he did upwards of 80.
He did around 324. I wrote it down.
That's crazy.
And also, there was a mathematician by the name of Peter Stoner who did the math on fulfilling the odds of fulfilling 48 of the prophecies, and that's 1 in 10 to the 157th power.
That is
That's
insane.
48. And Jesus fulfilled 324. 48 is a little bit over 1/9 of the amount of prophecies that Jesus fulfilled.
That's crazy.
So how could he not be?
He's
Either he didn't fulfill any of those prophecies, or he's the Messiah. There's no in between.
Right,
at
or
that point.
like to have him buy me a lottery ticket. It's just like,
You're gonna win every time.
Right, exactly. Like,
no kidding.
oh my
Oh.
gosh.
So another thing I've heard is that Jesus is a myth,
Mhm.
and I built an argument earlier about how he did exist as a human person. There
Right.
wasn't much archaeological evidence, but there is several writings outside of the Bible that say that Jesus was a person. One of them being Josephus, which was a Jewish. I think he was an elite in the Jewish community, but he's one that wrote about Jesus. And there's several other Roman and Jewish accounts from Roman officials and Jewish officials that write about Jesus. So he was a real person. People wrote about him, not just people in the Bible.
Mhm.
And also, I have another quote from Dr. Boa that says most of the New Testament was written between AD 47 and 70, and all of it was complete before the end of the century. So there simply was not enough time for myths about Christ to be created and propagated. If we think about a myth, it's a story that's formed over many years, and it's propagated by word of mouth,
Right.
usually. But the New Testament, all the accounts of Christ are written accounts, eyewitness accounts, and they're all written within a century. There just wasn't enough time for people to make up some crazy myths about Jesus. There just simply wasn't. Like 100 years is not enough time
especially they didn't have phones back then.
for that.
Right.
Myths are typically generational things. Like if we think about the Roman myths, right? Like it was something that was passed from generation to generation. But within 100 years, there's just no time for that to happen.
Not at all. Also, who would die for a myth that they made up?
Yeah.
You know, like 11 out of 12 disciples were martyred for.
And Jesus.
And Jesus, exactly. All of them died for this truth. One of them exiled to this random island, And like,
Poor John.
Poor John. Sorry, John. But like,
Justice for John.
they died brutal, gruesome deaths, crucified upside down, and
Because he didn't want to be crucified like Jesus.
right, exactly, Peter, and
Yeah.
also another. I don't know, another person, but Peter was crucified upside down because he didn't want to be crucified like Jesus. Like,
Yeah.
like, if, like, take Watergate for example. 12 people in a room decide to keep a lie together. 2 weeks later, it gets out. You know, and their life wasn't even on the line.
Yeah.
Right? And so like. 12 people, and Jesus revealed himself to over 500 people.
Yeah.
Not one of them wavered.
Yeah.
All of them said it was true, died for it.
Yep.
I wouldn't die for it if I knew it was fake.
That what you said about the 500 people, just so everybody knows, that's found in 1 Corinthians 15:6. So
Thank you.
reference right there. But yeah. So we were talking about what the 500 witnesses.
Right.
Deuteronomy 19:15 says that you need 2 witnesses to convict someone of a crime. In the U.S., the law states that you only need one witness to convict someone of a crime. Yet Americans refuse to believe the testimony of over 500 people.
Mm-hmm.
But if they were to hear the testimony of one person, they'd convict someone of murder. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
How does
make
that
sense?
make sense?
Right.
Or how does that add up? It doesn't. It just doesn't add up. So pretty strong argument for why Jesus is in fact the Messiah.
For
so
sure.
should we move into kind of
Origins.
creation, origins,
Yeah.
humanity, all that?
Yeah.
Emma, I know you got some juice in this.
Oh, I don't want to start. You
don't
guys
wanna start?
scare me.
Okay, I'll start. You want me to start?
Yes.
Okay, Emma, would you like to start at the Big Bang?
That was my stomach. It didn't hurt.
I'm just kidding. You want me to start for real?
Oh, I thought you guys were
you
laughing
want
because
that?
my tummy
No,
made
no,
a
no.
noise.
My tummy's been making so many noises during this.
We were laughing because you just sat there after like...
I thought you said you would start.
Yeah, my start was... Emma, would you like to tell us about the Big
Oh.
Bang?
Okay.
Is that a good start?
Yeah, but I don't know how to start it, so I don't want to start.
Okay. So, let's talk origins.
Right. Lots of different beliefs there.
Lots of beliefs. I would say that there's kind of 2 main clashing beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
One of them being that the atheistic belief of the Big Bang Theory, which basically everything came from nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Here we are, all accidental. Or the biblical belief that God created everything for a purpose. And yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of all there is to it. But
Right.
I think the biggest reason that the Big Bang Theory doesn't necessarily make sense is because of one of the biggest laws of science,
Mhm.
which is the conservation of mass energy, which basically means that all of energy and all of mass needs to be conserved, meaning
It can be neither created nor
can't
destroyed.
be created or destroyed, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh. So how do we start then?
If it can't be
Something come from
created,
nothing.
Right.
yeah, if it
Yeah.
can't be created and it can't be destroyed, how do we start from nothing
Mm-hmm.
and end up with an ever-expanding universe
Mm-hmm.
with tons of matter in it?
Right.
Yeah. And I
Doesn't
think
necessarily make sense.
the bang, they say, created the matter, the space, and the time that
Mhm.
our universe is. And in order for that to be created, it would have had to come from something that wasn't that. And the only thing that isn't that is God. Because
Mhm.
he's not matter, he's
Mhm.
not space, and he is not, like, confined to a time.
He's outside of all
Yes.
that.
Right.
Yeah, which is why it would make sense for him to create it, because he's not constrained by
Yes.
the laws of science, right? Or
Right.
the laws of physics, laws of our known universe.
Right.
And I think also, going on the Big Bang, is like you can ask like what caused that bang, and then like what caused the stuff to cause that bang, and then keep asking yourself what caused that, what caused that, what caused that. And like worldly things, everything needs something that started it, but
Yeah.
the only thing that doesn't need to start is God.
Yeah.
So like if we believe in the Big Bang, which like the Bible says, let there be light. So honestly, there could have been a bang. But who created that bang?
Yeah. I like that you said that. If you haven't watched God's Not Dead, go watch it. He says that in the movie. But anyway, what were you gonna say?
I feel like people believe the Big Bang because they see it as more scientific, right?
Right.
And the reason is because it's just been said so much that people think it's fact. And when in reality, if you really think about it, it doesn't make sense, like you guys were saying. And like, for something to be created, the universe has so many laws that we know of that contradict anything from inside the universe creating something. And so, how does it come to be? And like, how do we come to be? You know, how macroevolution deep down doesn't make sense. We've never seen any real evidence of like species to another species. We see microevolution every day, right? That's like little tiny like bits and pieces of one species, like, oh, now like they have bigger ears, right? But that's over hundreds of years of time, right? And like, it just, macroevolution from species to species doesn't have any evidence towards it. It doesn't make sense. And like, if that's how we developed, if we came from Neanderthals and all these like different human species, monkey, if we come from monkey, then like, how can we trust our own brain? Do you trust a monkey to know where it came from?
Yeah.
Like,
No, I don't.
no. You do? No, like,
I do.
You do.
All I can trust the monkeys on how to peel a banana.
Dude, I feel like they do it a lot better than us.
I think also like
upside
if we are so evolved, why aren't they more involved?
Well, yeah. Why are we the only species that is
More
as
involved.
advanced as we are?
Yeah.
Right.
Doesn't make a ton of sense.
Mm-hmm.
I want to circle back to creation for a second.
Yeah.
So, if we think about it, if our universe is accidental, how is it that Earth exists the way it does? How is it that we're the only planet we know that can support life? We're literally in the perfect spot to where we don't burn up and we don't freeze. And we can, how is it that everything on Earth can sustain life? Like, we have what we need to survive. Every animal has what it needs to survive. Every plant has what it needs to survive. How is it that all of those elements just happen to create things that create life?
Right.
Also, we're the only planet that we know of that contains life. Like, not the only planet that we know of that can support life, but also the only planet that we know of that contains life. We're the only life, like, people say, oh, aliens might exist, the universe is big. But from what we know right now, we're it.
Yeah.
Another thing, mathematics. Let's think about this for a second. The entire universe can be governed by mathematical equations. And all physics, it's all math. Everything, all the laws of physics, whatever, everything can be explained by a mathematical equation. How is that an accident?
It's not.
That makes no sense.
It doesn't at all.
It has to be intentional. Somehow, some way, it doesn't make sense for everything to be able to be explained but one way, through math. But it's an accident.
Right.
It just happens to be that way.
It's like picking up a puzzle box of 4 million pieces, dumping it out and expecting it to be made.
Exactly.
You know, that's exactly
100%.
that's what the Big Bang is. That's what like that's an accidental process.
But it's more like a trillion-piece puzzle.
Right, exactly.
Being thrown, right?
And falling into place perfectly.
Yeah.
That's how it happened. No, right?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't work like that. Nothing from what we've seen has ever worked like that. And like, for the arguments about like, oh, the world is like 65 million years old, all this, there's a term in geology. I don't know it. Like a friend of mine who at one point was a geology major told me. But it's basically how science works off of the assumption that everything has always worked the same, right? Like we're under that theory of the Earth is this old, this is how it happened. We're working under the assumption that it always worked like that. Rocks always broke down at this rate. Everything always happened at this rate. You know what might have changed that? A giant flood. Oh, you know what might have changed that? All these different events. God, right?
He could have easily changed that.
Exactly. And he even changed how old we can get, right? We got a cap at some point now.
Yeah.
Back then it was this guy's 900 years old.
And then he got tired of people and he was like, you're gonna die in 140.
Exactly. But and so things change.
Yeah.
And to work under the assumption that they don't, I think is a little close-minded.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I think, going off of this science, the definition of science, according to the dictionary, is the systemic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation, experimentation, and the testing of theories against the evidence obtained. And so with that, science can only tell us really about, all of the laws in this universe. And, where's the moral in that? How do we humans have a moral conscience? Why do we feel bad when certain things happen? Why do we feel good when certain things happen? Where does that come from?
All?
Yes.
Yeah.
Why do we feel? Where is that coming from? God.
Right. God. Yeah.
He's the only answer. You think it comes from an energy source just going to your heart or something? I don't know. Where does it come from? I've never heard anyone answer that question.
But it's also just your
science.
basic needs. Why can't we just exist?
Yeah.
It's just you have to eat, you have to sleep, you have to exercise. Those are things that you absolutely have to do. But why?
Yeah. I think another thing is if we evolved from monkey or whatever, how is it that we would be able to know right from wrong? A lot of people argue that it's for whatever's for the good of the community. We evolved to that's where our morals evolved. But technically, based on that theory, murder would be okay if you were murdering the kind of outcasts of the community or the people that were harming the community or people with disabilities, for example, people with mental disabilities.
People with cancer.
Things like that. By that logic, that would be okay.
Right.
And yet we all know that's wrong.
Yeah. From an evolutionary standpoint, mass murder is okay.
100%. 100%. Oh, we're overpopulating? Genocide's the answer.
Exactly.
Evolution would say that's totally fine. If it was for the good of the community, that would be okay. But we all know deep down that's wrong.
No.
We all know Hitler was wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's just hard for me to wrap my head around morality if there is no God. How could we be moral beings? You look at a sheep.
Yeah.
It's not a moral being. Humans are the only moral beings that we know of.
Right.
And yet, we're just animals according to science.
Murder and rape are both very prevalent within the animal kingdom.
100%.
Nothing wrong with it.
100%. Yeah, that's another thing. If it was for the good of the community, evolutionary morals, rape would be okay too, right? Because
it's repopulation. We all know that's wrong.
Exactly. Yeah.
People wouldn't get married.
Exactly.
That
Love
too.
wouldn't be a thing.
That's love and beauty.
God is love.
Oh
Drop the mic.
We're done here.
Here's another thing that I've noticed. Science can't quantify beauty. In a person, symmetry, whatever. How is it that you look at a sunset and you say, that's beautiful?
True.
But then you go to science and you say, well, it's really just the light bending through the atmosphere at a certain angle that makes the colors that way.
Right.
That doesn't sound beautiful to me,
No.
but when I look at it, it's beautiful.
Right.
So that's another thing that, like, I look at beauty and I just think of God, and Emma's beautiful. I just wanted to say that.
Not me.
You, Calvin, you're beautiful, man. Appreciate it.
You're blushing over there, Colin.
I
I
know.
see it.
All right. There's so much more we could talk about.
Yeah,
So many
there's
good
so much.
labels on this topic.
But
Does anybody else have anything pressing they want to say before we wrap it up?
I have a Bible verse that kind of goes into like God creating the universe.
Do it.
And a lot of people say, or I guess it's a fact, that the universe began to exist and it's like constantly expanding, like it's getting bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And in the Bible, in Isaiah 42:5, it actually says, God, the Lord, created the heavens and stretched them out. He created the earth and everything in it. And then it goes on. But he said, created the heavens and stretched them out. And
Chat, is this real?
the universe is expanding,
That's
so...
crazy.
Dude,
Yeah.
that's actually
I've never
I've
noticed
never
that.
heard that before either. Yeah.
High five, Emma.
Good job, Emma. That was good.
That was good.
On a good note.
Awesome, guys.
Yeah.
I've loved this.
Me too.
Another reminder for everyone, if you have no other defense, if nothing else comes up in your mind when someone asks you to defend your faith, talk about what God has done for you in your life. That's the easiest way to
That's
go
powerful.
about it. But I hope this is helpful. I had fun.
I had so much fun.
This is great. Thank you guys. We out. Bye.
Steadily changing, it's making me better. I'm turning a new thing, it's making me stronger. Yeah, yeah. Christ is in my life, for I'm good. Yeah, Christ is in my life, for I'm good. Yeah. Ooh, wow, I can understand. You're a perfect man. Got the whole world in your hands, but you still reaching out for me. Ooh, wow, why you love me too? I'm nothing like you. Opposite of holiness was what I was, but I'm to you. See my soul and could you see why? Hold my hand high, could you see